Bom dia a todos. Espero que vocês estejam gostando desse debate. Eu acho que tem sido bastante interessante pela qualidade das pessoas que estão aqui. E não tenho dúvidas de que eu, pelo menos, tomei nota de várias coisas. Aqui foi um belo encontro de insights. Como a dinâmica do nosso evento é um painel atrás do outro, eu sei que agora o pessoal saiu, vai fazer lá, vai conversar, vai explorar outras possibilidades com os painelistas. No entanto, a gente tem um painel aqui diferente, é um painel de grandes empresas. Eu vou seguir em inglês, mas queria só fazer essa observação agora, nesse primeiro momento. E eu vou fazer uma apresentação muito rápida das pessoas que estão aqui. So, I will introduce you very briefly. Marco Stefanini is the founder and the president of Stefanini IT Solution, a big Brazilian company, IT company. It's a long story to tell. From my right side, I have Karen Breitman. Karen is a general manager and the R&D of the R&D center of EMC. EMC is the largest company, is the biggest company on data management and now big data. And I have on the right side also Gurudu Banabar. Gurudu is a vice president. I think is old. These definitions here. Yeah, I think so. But Gurudu is a senior executive. He will explain to you later. But he's a senior executive of IBM, and also is a key officer for the public sector. So let me start this conversation with you guys, making a general question for all of you. This is a typical kind of, the big guys are here. So you're the guys, you're the companies, a Brazilian company, 2 international companies here. How international and big companies, international or national companies, doesn't matter, how big companies like yours can promote entrepreneurship? What's the programs that you have internally that develop this kind of platforms on your business? Please.
All right, let me start. Thank you for that question. I should probably just mention a little bit about my background so you know why I'm saying what I'm saying. I'm a career researcher. I've been working at the IBM T.J. Watson Research Center for a number of years, more than 10 years, and then I was the lab director for the IBM Research Lab in India for almost 5 years. So I'm also bringing in the experience from what it takes to build research and development capability in a growth market like in India. And I think there are a lot of parallels. In fact, there were some questions asked this morning about social entrepreneurship and so forth, which I want to make some comments about as well, given that experience. And I think of myself as an entrepreneur, which is really the entrepreneurial spirit within a larger institution like IBM. And the reason I think of myself as an entrepreneur is because I have started many businesses within IBM. Any large institution is really a collection of businesses that end up consolidating and making a cohesive sort of a market approach. And I have been involved in creating a number of businesses in IBM already. And I've seen also how the patents that I've myself developed or the technologies that we've developed as a team have turned into real products and services that have made a difference in the market, not only in the big markets like the United States and in Europe, but also in the growth markets like in India and in Brazil, where I've been working with the city of Rio de Janeiro on a few projects here as well. So I believe that from a capacity building perspective, there is a unique position of larger institutions like the ones represented here that can bring in a level of competence, capability, that is expertise in various areas. I'm currently responsible for areas like computational biology, nanotechnology, and many different kinds of very large, complex systems that requires infrastructure, investment, whether it is IT infrastructure or in some cases machine shops and equipment for doing genomic processing for sequencing and many other kinds of genomic processes. It requires heavy infrastructure, heavy investments in people, and it requires a certain level of investment savvy to be able to internally, organically develop these entrepreneurial ideas. And those capabilities, I think, complement very well the entrepreneurial capabilities that I think we heard about this morning, where small companies with people, with a lot of vision and drive, who have to build everything themselves, the lawyers and everybody else, they have to pull them all together to create certain new value in the market. But as an entrepreneur, I also create new value in the market with a framework that is a little bit better defined perhaps, and sometimes it's constraining, but as part of the research unit of IBM, I can tell you that I probably am the least constrained because I'm responsible for not only developing new technologies, but also developing new business models for going into the market. And I'm happy to talk about all of these experiences, but I just wanted to lay that framework to say, large institutions and entrepreneurs like myself and the teams that I work with in IBM have a very significant role to play in building up the kind of innovation that you're talking about here and building up the capacity to innovate in a country.
Well, similarly, I came from the academia world and to begin a startup because our research center is being built from the ground up. So we're 13 today, and we're doing something that is very novel to Brazil. In Brazil, when I finished my PhD, there was no such thing as an industrial PhD, industrial research, and we could not do that. And we're starting to do that and starting to develop projects and drive innovation into the market. But to go back to Thomas More, no man is an island. We cannot do that by ourselves. We cannot drive that much innovation and just do the technology transfer at the rate that we need to do with involving the number of people we need to involve if we do that alone. So we're creating within the center, we're just creating a whole ecosystem of partners. We're developing a concrete example. We're developing plugins for a platform that Schlumberger uses called Ocean that will leverage the use of storage products that need to be leveraged today. We're developing one of them in-house, but we cannot provide services. We cannot provide assistance, the necessary customization. And we have another 10 of such plugins spec'd out. We need to develop, and we're fostering the creation of new, smaller companies that will develop that and work in conjunction with us. And we will take them under our wing, and our wing is a little bit bigger, to help them do that. We want to do that in scale, and come on, scaling out is what EMC does best, right? So we're creating a center that is going to open at the university. We're doing it in collaboration with the university, Federal University of Rio. We want to open the Big Data Reference Center, in which we'll incubate little businesses. We'll provide them a very big sandbox in which to play, in which to develop complementary technologies. And we want these companies to be created around us. They are important for our success here in Brazil. So it's very important for us at EMC R&D, at EMC Labs, to create an environment that is conducive of research, that is attractive to young engineers, to young computer scientists, to young mathematicians, to young hard sciences majors, so that they can come and work with us in developing, in adding to the technology we're driving here in the center. For that, we're trying to act together with the university, just fostering education. I understand that's the role of the education, the university, and I was a university professor for many years. But the fact of the matter is that the tempo with the industry, the government, and academia, they're very different. And we need these things for tomorrow. We need to train people to become data scientists for tomorrow. So how do we do that? We started out, we provided a course last February for what we expected to be 100 people. We had 750 show up at the door. How can we scale that out? Do we double the number? We accepted 150. Do I want 300 next year? No, I want 3,000. How do I do that? What kind of technologies we're going to use for that? So we're thinking of using this new technology of just transmitting live on the movie theaters. I want to take this to 10 different capitals in Brazil. I want to take that to another 5 in Latin America. I have to use transmission. I have to use movies. I'm talking to Rio Filmes and said, well, guys, can you help me? I need guys that know how to do that. I need cinematographers. I need lighting. I need ways to transmit that. We have to scale out. In Brazil, we've been great at educating few. We have to educate much more. And we need, but I don't do movies. I don't do that. I need entrepreneurs that can come with us and just help us bring out those ideas, give them life.
Maybe here. Okay. Hi. I think that first of all, I want to mention that Stefanini is a little bit different from IBM and NEC because we are IT services company. Then we see innovation a little bit different. We are not a real R&D company. And we see innovation, or we work in this area more how to add value to the business side, to our clients. This is our perspective. We understand that we can add value, of course, for our company. And answering to your question, that many years ago, we think that is a very entrepreneur model that Stefanini is like is a joint of hundreds of cells, like business units. We call internally cells. They have a very strong autonomy. They decide with the clients, sometimes some investments, hiring people. They are very entrepreneur. And we follow the results monthly, only the results. This model is interesting because we extend this model to also to the technical areas. The same model, they have a lot of autonomy. And of course, during the last years, we are improving this model. Always we have to improve some areas or some models. But it's very important that the company is based in a very entrepreneur model that gives to the people a lot of autonomy, of course, responsibility together, of course. This is more or less that we see this model. And this model is working maybe around more than 15 years, which is a long time.
Great. So Marcelo, there was one other point I wanted to add, extremely important point given the discussion this morning about how large companies like IBM and all of us can support innovation here. Just to give you some numbers, IBM's R&D budget every year is about $6 billion. And IBM's budget for acquisitions, inorganic growth, is around $20 billion in the last 3 years. So the M&A strategy, the merger and acquisition strategy for a company like IBM is tremendous. And essentially, I think, we discussed exit strategies this morning for startups. If you're a small company, how do you become big, or how do you essentially, achieve your dream. I think one of the biggest the best exit strategies is to perhaps get acquired by a company like IBM. That is,
or EMC.
Or yeah, like any one of us. That will give you the scale to get to the next level. Of course, if you're a serial entrepreneur, I mean, there's many examples where companies like IBM have acquired smaller companies and built them to multi-billion-dollar businesses. I can give you a half a dozen examples of those, right away. Like I2 Curum, Tivoli, Lotus used to be a small company, et cetera, et cetera. I could keep going on. So that's an extremely important part of how large companies adds to the innovation ecosystem, if you will.
Very good.
Yeah.
Back to the basics. This panel was to discuss what kind of technologies and what kind of investments Rio is hosting now, primarily on oil and gas industries, and what's beyond that. How is your experience among your clients, among your developments, among your experience grew into global platforms and among different kind of customer needs, which is a new stage of investments beyond oil and gas. There will be a new framework on biotech, nanotech, information technology, big data, that will find effectively markets and purchase power to accommodate a new level of investments?
You want to start? I think from what I see, I had a very positive impact of the fact that we're establishing our R&D center is focused solely in oil and gas. So that's what we're doing. Our main focus is in that. We're growing to do cater to challenges that exist in oil and gas. But we've been, every day I receive 1 or 2 calls from different people that want us to develop projects in different areas. And what I hear the most is projects in health. So I think a substantial investment in health would be something that Rio could be looking after. Of course, other areas have been catered to. A financial area has been moved to São Paulo, and the financial center of the country is indeed located in there. But traditionally, and both DataPrev and DataSUS, which are the government agencies, do have very large offices here and do have a lot of processing here. We do have a very distinct situation in terms of hospitals and how they are divided and how the government, federal and state, do run the hospitals. So this is particularly an area that has, it's not so obvious, but it's very complementary to oil and gas in the sense that the needs for prediction, the needs for big data analysis, the needs for intelligence in using that data and putting that to work to the benefit of the population of the state and the city of Rio would be greatly seen. And I think this is the main focus where if we should invest, we should be looking into health. That's my 2 cents.
I can add to her that, for example, in terms of financial market, I agree that many banks are moving to São Paulo, but I want to remind that, for example, insurance, that at least half of the insurance industry is here in Rio. And this industry will grow a lot in the next years in Brazil because we have a LACC compared with the developed countries. I think it's a good opportunity. The other opportunity is also in financial market because we have some differentials included to export. We can develop a lot of small solutions in terms of business side for financial market because financial market in Brazil is very well developed in terms of IT. Then I think is also opportunity. Other is more creative industries like games, technology associates with arts, because the spirit of not only the Brazilian spirit, but mainly for the Rio, yes, spirit. And also, remember that when we want to create innovation center, or it's, of course, the quality of life is very important. That Rio, of course, is wonderful to attract good people to live here, yes? Unfortunately, I live in São Paulo, but of course, my dream is, or
Better than
maybe,
Argentina.
yes, is living here. Okay, I think that's the key, is how Rio can leverage this opportunity in terms of our oil and gas revenues to move for more sustainable technology, because unfortunately oil and gas one day will finish, yes? That's how we can finance this, yes? Not lucky for me, it's okay. But we can extend for different areas, not only concentrating in oil and gas. That's, of course, oil and gas today is the base. I visited other day the Petrobras, and it's a very strong R&D development center. But I think that is a unique opportunity to extend for other areas. Okay.
So let me give you my perspective. So I'm a trained computer scientist. Okay, so I come in from the world of the basic world of networking and large distributed systems like the internet and so forth. That was my area of research for many years. But I think we're now in a new phase of evolution for new technologies. The next 50 years, right, or at least the next 20 to 30 years, is going to be the time for genomics, personalized health and medicine, and so forth. That's just at the beginning of the wave, if you will. When I talk to scientists or professionals in this area and ask the question, do you know the answer to this particular problem, more often than not, 80% of the time I hear the answer, I don't know the answer. Whereas in information technology, that used to be the case maybe about maybe 20, 30 years ago. But now, we have problems in the area of very large data, and it's converging with biotechnology in many ways, computational biology, like I was saying, where you need to be able to handle very large data sets. We call it big data, but it's really, now we've reached zettabytes of data. That's 10 to the power 24, which requires that you don't, you cannot anymore move data from where it's generated to where it can be processed, because the networks don't support it anymore. You have to move the computers to where the data exists, because the data is being generated at such a rate that you need very large, high-performance computers to do the kind of processing that we need these days. So if going back to your question about what areas do we need to look at if you look at the long term, 10, 20, 30 years, it's certainly the confluence of information technology and biology. It's a huge area for new capacity development. I think application of information technology in the more traditional areas like oil and gas and let's say electrical and grids, or in transportation systems and all of those things, are still interesting areas, but I would say that there's a lot of techniques that are currently available that need to be applied in the appropriate way, and the value should be extracted from it. The brand new areas will be in the information technology and biotechnology intersection, I would say.
From your platform, please. Hello.
From your platform, which is a global platform,
yeah.
What kind of cases, what kind of scenarios from other BRIC countries are working towards this kind of new technology or new developments. Do you see any other places or any positive actions from governments, from institutions around the globe to foster this kind of new technology hubs around the world?
Yeah, and let me take this because I do have some experience from India that I want to share. So I built a research lab from scratch in Bangalore from 2005 to 2010, and then moved back to the United States. So my experience in Bangalore was primarily to get back a core group of technologists who could ride the wave of global delivery and globalization that was going on at the time. So I in fact attracted more than 50 PhDs and technologists from the United States to move back to India. People like me, expats of India, to come back to Bangalore, and we started this group that worked on many technologies that were very interesting. And I know these are technologies that you cannot simply take from either the United States or Europe and simply implement it because the scale required, we have 1 billion people in India, and the cost point required for delivering it to the people who are just getting into the middle class or people who haven't yet gotten into the middle class is very different. You are talking about razor-thin margins, but you're talking about huge scales. And the kind of technologies that we developed there, I'll give you one example. We built something called Spoken Web, which ended up getting a President's Award for Innovation. And it would not have been invented anywhere else other than in India, I think. And the idea there was we have the World Wide Web. We all accept that as a given because we have smartphones and we have computers. But most people in India, and there are about 500 to 600 million people with mobile phones which are not smartphones. These are feature phones that can only basically make a phone call because that's all they can afford. So the question is, how can we make the web a place where they can do normal business? If you're a carpenter, or if you are a fisherman, or if you are somebody who drives an auto rickshaw, how do you build a business around that using the web, but not the web that we all know, which is with URLs and everything else, but it's rather using your telephone to create what we called voice sites. You create a voice site from your telephone, and you can have other people call into your voice site and make appointments or understand what your business is and pay you all through your phone by speaking voice commands. And you can understand the complexity of that given the multiple languages we have in India and everything else. So that technology is now being used and piloted in many parts where it goes into the rural areas where people don't have a clue about what computing is or what the internet is, but they're able to make a phone call. That's all they can do, and so you start from there. And then we've started building business models around what they can do for financial processing because they don't save money. They just did not have a bank account. They're unbanked people in India who started banking for the very first time in their lives because they had access to a mobile phone, right? So these are the kinds of things that you would not invent. I mean, we have many patents in these areas, but we wouldn't invent them if I was sitting in my lab in New York. I would only invent this if I was sitting in a lab in Bangalore, right? And I would bet you that there are examples like that in Brazil. I don't understand Brazil enough to say, which part of the culture in a favela would actually benefit from new technologies. I mean, it may have to do with, the demand for electricity or demand for entertainment, or it may, be demand for, basic services like education, which, there are learning styles that are very, very relevant to a kid who grew up in a favela. You cannot take a learning module that you developed in the United States and apply that. You have to develop a new learning system. Those are examples of things that you could do over here. When I was in India, I would do the ABC, which is astrology, Bollywood, cricket, kinds of things as a way to do it. And you would probably find the same kind of ABCs in Brazil, I think.
But look, in Brazil, we have one essential difference from the rest of the BRICS. Our cost of labor is enormous in relation to that. So India, Russia, and China are low-cost areas. So these are the countries where companies that do have to export development of software, of code, they export to these countries. Brazil is expensive, and the only reason we have an R&D center in Brazil the reasons are, one, the talent that we have here, and secondly, the problems. The pre-solved problems exist in Brazil. The knowledge of the problems, the capability of specification and understanding of the problems, and the closeness to the challenges are what brings us here. But the challenge is to continue and keep an R&D center sustainable in a country where labor is so expensive. So if I'm successful, actually if I'm very successful, I'm going to grow my center, I'm going to have the 50 researchers that I'm thinking of, that it's in the plan of record. But if I need another 100, and I can't export and I can do my development and my research in India or Russia or India, I will, because it's really expensive. So how can the government help? Well, we have to think about the cost of labor for R&D. And everything that surrounds us as well. The import tax for equipment is crazy, the complications, the Byzantine tax laws, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But labor is a fact. So if the government wants to do one thing, that is reducing the fringe for R&D, for researchers working in research centers. Otherwise, I cannot see sustainable growth for the R&D centers that are establishing themselves here in Rio.
Any comments, Mark?
I agree with Carrie, totally agree. We are not low-cost country like the others. And I think that it's very important, I agree that we need some incentives in terms to keep or to this area more sustainable. But I want also to add something that maybe, of course, returning to your question, that's the best examples that we can compare is in Asia, sure, yes. Of course, besides India, we have China that's developed is a different model. But maybe specifically for Rio de Janeiro, maybe we can compare with Singapore. Singapore is not a low-cost country, okay? 50 years ago was very poor under British colony. They maybe, and it's a port. And I understand that Singapore is a good example maybe to Rio to compare something, for example, for financial markets, because we can have in this industry not so low cost salaries. We can have better salaries, and sometimes we can combine with some rural areas like the interior, because today the cost of, in terms of labor costs, facilities costs, that's today in Rio and São Paulo are very high. If you combine with some mid-sized cities, like Juiz de Fora and some other cities, maybe we can balance a little bit the cost, like Singapore is doing with Malaysia. Malaysia is the copy of Singapore. They are developing very well. Their cost until now is low cost, okay? That's maybe only to add to you, that's of course, besides the incentives of the government, I think that we need to work in this, maybe this combination of cities, because mid-sized cities usually they have a better cost than the big cities everywhere. Yes.
Interesting point. Well, talking about people, because people is a key success factor for all innovation, for all new ventures. How your companies hire talent people?
I hire the hungry. I want the kids who want to do it. I want the kids who want to learn. I want the kids who want to be data scientists. I hire researchers, essentially. So what we do is, I understand that we gotta do part of that. Sitting around and just complaining about the education is just not gonna take us anywhere. We cannot compete to other countries like India. There are more students in honors math in India than there are students doing math in Brazil. So if we don't start looking at education from the bottom up, we're just not going to do it. So I need data scientists, so we're funding a project to improve math teaching on 9th grade, together with the Secretaria de Educação. We have to do that. We're doing the Big Data Summer School. We want to double that, the frequency of the summer school. We have to help the education of young minds in Brazil to come and work for us. We have to do our part, and that's part of being part of the ecosystem. Now, we are trying to attract talent to Rio. Yesterday I mentioned a program, Volta Carioca. We have to do a repatriation program for Cariocas that are away from here. They left, they've been leaving for 10 years. They have to come back. We have to go and look for everybody who's out of the country, who did a master's, a PhD, have them come back to work here. We have to send a call for positions to people who study at very good institutions all around Brazil. The best engineering minds are not in Rio, although our best computer science departments are in Rio. I belong to the top one for many years as a professor, but honestly, there are great schools in the Northeast. There are great schools in the middle of Brazil, in Campo Grande. It's a great school. We have to attract these guys. It's expensive to come to Rio, so this is something we can do in conjunction with FAPERJ, which is the equivalent to the NSF, the local NSF here. We have to attract the talent to come, to visit Rio, to talk to the entrepreneurs and say, hey, maybe there's an opportunity for you here. Maybe there's an opportunity for you to come and work for EMC, R&D Center, for IBM, for Cisco, for Halliburton. And maybe even you can do a master's or a PhD here in one of the local universities. Why not? But it's expensive to come to Rio. We have to attract them to do it. I did a very cheap trick last year to attract them to come to the Big Data Summer School. I did it the week right before Carnival. So the students who got the grant to come, they could extend their ticket and enjoy Carnival in Rio. But we have to do that. There are great, talented, very capable Brazilian engineers in a lot of other cities that need to have the opportunity to come to the city of Rio, enjoy the city a little bit, and stay maybe.
Interesting. How to feed your company and where to find this talents, Marco?
As I already said that we work very spread in terms of Brazil. Today we have development centers in around 20 different cities. And this is a way to find more people, not only concentrated in Rio, São Paulo, and Brasilia. That's more expensive and more difficult to find people. The second, of course, we have a lot of agreements, partnerships with universities. There are some interesting partnerships that's, for example, in the South, we have two cases. That we have a development center, the service center inside the university campus. That's interesting. We have some global clients like Idel, Gerdau, that we offer services from there. Okay, that's the second. The third is very important to offer to our people because, again, we are services, not we don't hire a lot of scientists, more IT guys. We offer to them not high salaries, is not possible because our sector is very competitive. What we do that we offer to them a faster career for them to grow. Okay. The other point is that we also train the experienced people in new technologies. That is very important also to keep. But I agree that when we are talking about innovation, technology, that education is key. Yes, that's, and I think that there are two very big challenges. One is language. If you want to be global, we need to speak English at least. And we don't have a lot of people in Brazil, unfortunately, that don't speak English. This is a barrier. It's very serious, because if you are talking about people, we need to communicate. If you don't speak the same language or not fluently, is a very strong issue. The second is the quantity of engineers that they are studying. In this way, I think in this area, this scenario, I think maybe we have good news that this year is the first year that we have more engineers studying than lawyers. It's the first year, yes. For example, around some years ago, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, is only 5%. Today is almost 10% of the total people that is studying are in terms of engineering. And lawyers decrease from 15 to 9, okay? Of course, we need to do much more, but at least it's a good beginning, okay? Thank you.
Any thoughts, Guru? Because how IBM India, how IBM Russia, those countries, they are really, in the case of India, the scale is really a different different factor compared to Brazil and compared to any other country except China. But how do you, from your knowledge about Brazil, how can we, in the short term, how can we overcome this issue?
Okay. You know, about 5 years ago or 4, I did a global study of the available talent in multiple countries, in terms of the number of PhDs and the quality of the publications and the number of patents that are being developed in multiple countries around the world, because we were looking for which is the next place we should be starting a research lab. And I was part of that team doing this. And what I came to the conclusion during the study was that Brazil actually has a lot of very good people in the country, more so than the other countries that I was considering at the time. I don't want to compare to India, because I think the scale over there, as you said, the number of people as well as the cost is so different that it's probably not fair to compare it. But comparing to ASEAN and comparing to other parts of Latin America, I think is fair. And just from a research and development perspective, I saw that the number of patents and publications by people in Brazil was actually pretty high. Now, I think that's an absolute number. It's not a relative number in terms of how many per capita publications or patents are generated by Brazil. It was just an absolute number. So if you look at the per capita numbers, it's probably going to land much lower, is my guess, because you have a big population. And my suggestion from what I have seen in Brazil is what you mentioned, Marco, the university relations and using a combination of industry and academia to develop the talent is probably the biggest thing that I would go after. So for example, having very strong internship programs and faculty partnership programs, and it's almost like sort of an apprenticeship program, where the people in academia and people in the industry recognize each other's capabilities. So the people in the academia perhaps will bring in a few leading practitioners from the industry to train them on the foundational concepts, which academics do very well with. And similarly, people in academia send their master's and PhD students over to the industry to get trained in the real world problems that need to be solved today, as opposed to sticking with, sort of the classical theory of, math or science that existed from a while ago. That kind of stronger connection between industry and academia, I would say, is probably the #1 thing that we need to do. And I'll use my example from India just as a model here, not to replicate it, just to say what is possible. Over that period from 2005 to 2010, we actually created something called service science, because India is a very service-oriented economy. Yeah. And so we started creating programs, master's degrees, in universities in India to teach service science. And I now have more than 20 universities in India teaching service science. We created the curriculum, and we had people in, this goes back to, I think, your industry, really, right? People understand what it means to come out of university and be a productive service engineer, not a traditional software engineer or other kinds of engineer, but to be a professional services person, which requires a different kind of training. And that was something that a consortium of companies in Bangalore took on as a challenge and took it to the academia. So I would probably focus on those points.
But there are two issues here.
Okay.
The first issue is the labor. Again, we go back to labor, and the question is to have an intern from the university at my center and just grant him use of the equipment. If he has any sort of grant from the government, I cannot do that, because I am liable to be sued, saying that, well, you're using the student who has a funding agency X, Y, or Z grant, and he's actually working for you. So this is one of the things that we have to, PhDs and masters in industry. So that's something that we're working with the Ministry of Science and Technology and Innovation to try to regulate that. We have to have clarity on that, and nobody has. It's not even clear whether if you have a grant from a funding agency, whether you can work or not. Some say yes, it's not clear. The legislation, so yeah, and I'm liable to being sued for, using government funds to partly pay for the guy working for me. So that's one of the issues. The second one, it's something that it's a very touchy issue in Brazil, which is, should we direct the students that we have here to the specific areas of study, because these are the things we need. In Germany, they do that always. So the good math, STEM students, they go to the gymnasium. The other ones go through a different track. But we always avoided doing that in Brazil when you have a very democratic learning, which is fine. But it does not serve the needs of a growing country. We need to say, look, we don't need more lawyers, so let's shut down some of the law universities. Let's focus on engineering. Let's focus on the areas that we need. We can do that in a more subtle way, maybe, providing incentives to these. But we should be able to do that, because if we consider even the countries around us, they do that. They prepare their students, and I ran the computer engineering course at PUC, which was a pretty good one for many years. The students in Argentina, again, are much more prepared in terms of business to just go for the real world. Whereas we try to do something which is more eclectic, which is more democratic, but it's not working for the country in its specific moment. And that's a touchy issue. It's a complicated issue. It's an issue that the government, together with the Ministry of Education, with the sectors of the economy, has to do. And what's happening and what we're looking at is that IBM has a certification course, EMC does that, Stefanini probably does. So what's happening is that there's a gap, and students are turning into certification as a form of education to fill the gap and to cater to the needs of the market. But that's a much larger discussion, and we're not going to get into that here. Marcelo should, though.
Well, before you join the collective session for Q&A, let me do the first quote for you guys. Well, if you find a genius, what kind of the only one wish you should ask for him? I quite know about the issues, the wishes from for Brazil. Just one wish, okay? Yeah, we're taking notes. I have the connection with the genius.
I can go if you want.
Yeah, okay.
For me, I think it should be about making the bar, asking the government to make the entrepreneurial process as simple as at least, you know, the other you know, BRIC countries that are successful. I would say even India's process is better than here.
Can you be more specific about entrepreneurial issues?
The number of days it takes to start a new business should be within, let's say, you know, 60 days.
For me, a simplification of labor laws. Labor laws are way too complicated, and we need our taxes are Byzantine at best, and labor is really complicated. We have to simplify that. We have to have a more comprehensible model to run and to grow. Otherwise, it's just two. I have 2 finance people just around the center. We're 13, we have 2 to do the operations. The structure, the infrastructure is so complicated that my COO is in Brasilia now because we are part of TI Maior, the program. The government kindly offered their help to help us understand how to better structure our nonprofit. I mean, it's so complicated. It's not obvious. There's not written anywhere. There are many interpretations. This is like the Torah. You know, Rabbi this interprets this way and Rabbi that the other way. But we need to simplify. Simplification. As simple as possible, no simpler than that, as one of ours would say, right?
We are from Brascom, that's the Association for IT, that's now we are trying to develop a new program that we call modernization of the relationship between capital and people, that's employees. That's more or less summarizing that you already said, because, for example, I agree with you that we take too much time to open a company, but today we have some specific issue that if you, like me, IT company, that if I hire a lot of small companies, our government see us as see these people as an employee, and we have a strong fines. Okay, that's I call the whole picture is modernization in terms of labor laws, including how to outsource, how no, because we know that when we are talking about technology, innovation, it's a pool of talent that each of these people has their own company. We need to see different picture, because our labor laws come from 80 years ago. Of course, is over, at least 50 years. That may be summarizing. We need to rethink our model in terms of labor laws.
Thank you. Well, we're running out of time. I don't know if the audience has questions to make for the group here. Yes, we have one.
My name is Efim Schluger. I'm the founding partner of OCNO, Urban Consultants. I'd like to make a question to the panelists regarding the city that actually attracts the entrepreneurs to settle in it. In other words, the quality of life, the cost of living, and what would be the competitive indexes of a city that is attractive for attracting more entrepreneurs, including the periphery of these cities. In other words, not the center, because we understand that everything is being built in the center of the city, but how about the periphery of the metropolitan areas? Thank you.
Want me to go? I'll be short. Cities, I think, in the 21st century are much more powerful than they were in the 20th century. In fact, there will be people who argue that collections of cities that cross national boundaries by ignoring national boundaries are probably more powerful than nations, right? And so what that means is that while cities think that they're not competing with anybody, they are actually competing for everything, right? Dollars, information, people. People is the most important thing. So your question is about the people. How do we get the smartest people to come in here? Richard Florida's book about the rise of the creative class basically says that you have to create an environment in which you can unleash the power of the creative individuals. And that requires many of the government interventions that we talked about, but it also requires, it goes beyond that. It goes to quality of life. I love the Carioca quality of life. You already have it over here, and I don't know about the rest of Brazil, how it is. But if we can reduce the government barriers, it looks like you can make big things happen here.
Well, the center of the city, everybody in Rio wants to stay in the south area of the city. So what we call Rio proper, right? As opposed to Baja and the outskirts. But we need to distinguish, we need to get the companies out of that and just populate the whole areas of the city. And then we start creating, we make it stronger. So we are in the outskirts, we are in the Ilha do Fundão. I mean, how further than that can you go, right? But we need to start developing the other sides too. And I agree with you, it's very important. And as important in the light of what we were discussing. And yesterday, this topic came up. I mean, we're seeing, we're redesigning with the new technologies, telcos, the way we are connected today. It doesn't make sense to talk about countries anymore. It makes sense to talk about communities. And in that sense, we will probably see the recreation of what we used to call the city-state. Remember the tiny little states that we had in Italy back in the 16th century? So we're talking about Rio and Sao Paulo and the cities rather than the country. And it's important that we think of the ecosystem of the city, of the community of Rio, as a body, as a separate body, and start developing it and taking care of every neighborhood. And our mayor has been doing this pretty efficiently, I believe, and taking care of all of the other areas in the city. I don't know if you have the opportunity of going far, driving far away to go to work and actually see that, but this is something that is changing, and that's transformational for the city, especially what we're doing in terms of education. The government is doing in the navies, in the schools, and trying to bring up, raise the bar in terms of education. There are bilingual schools, I don't know if you know that, in Pavuna and in Maré. So we are actively, EMC R&D Center is actively collaborating with them. It's really important to foster and to bring these initiatives under our wing. We're going to be stronger in the end. And and just quoting the Americans, together we stand. So we all have to do that, and we have to bring it to ourselves. It's not like what the government can do for us, but what we can do for the government and for the city. We are Rio. There's not a separate entity that is just there and Rio is doing that, or the government. We are the government. I elected this government. So I'm responsible, and I will take the responsibility and act on it. And everybody should do the same. And we'll have a phenomenal place to live in the next few years.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Guru. Thank you, Marco. Great insight.